Global Television Network.
Saif al-Islam, the son of late leader Muammar Gaddafi, calls on Russia to support a plan to resolve Libya's conflict. Rwandan opposition leader Diane Rwigara speaks on her acquittal over charges of inciting insurrection and forgery. And the UN rejects the US-drafted resolution condemning Hamas. Hello and welcome to CGTN. This is Africa Live and I'm Karen Roberts in Nairobi. Also coming up in the programme. In business, crude prices fall after OPEC members fail to agree on production cuts. And in sport, South Africa's Blitz box out for a strong Rugby Sevens showing on home soil. We start in Somalia, where two senior Somali military commanders and several soldiers have been killed in a blast outside the capital, Mogadishu. Officials and witnesses say the generals were travelling with a military convoy on the coastal road linking the Somali capital to the port city of Marka when their pickup truck was targeted. Al-Shabaab has claimed responsibility for the attack. Let's now head to Libya, where Saif al-Islam, the son of late leader Muammar Gaddafi, has called on Russia to support a plan to resolve the Libyan crisis. Al Arabiya TV channel is reporting that Saif al-Islam envoy visited Moscow earlier in the week as part of a Libyan delegation. The group held meetings with Russian officials, including Deputy Foreign Minister Mikhail Bogdanov. Libya is looking for ways to have a national reconciliation dialogue that will involve all warring parties. This in efforts to restore and to secure a roadmap for Libya's peace process. Well, for more on this, we are now joined by Yasser Hakim in Cairo for us. Yasser, this comes barely a month after Moscow hosted Libyan military strongman Khalifa Haftar. Why Russia?
Well, for several reasons, and if we take first the Saif al-Islam's perspective from his side, obviously Saif al-Islam is the son of the former Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi, who was ousted and killed by rebels supported by NATO and the Western allies. And therefore, these European and Western sides are not really considered the road or the channel that he would trust to try to go back to the scene or have some say in the political framework of Libya at the moment. He's obviously also is viewed by the West as not the right person to be in the political scene at the moment, being the son of Gaddafi, and also he had part in the power sharing of Gaddafi's rule at the time, and he led a few ministries and was one of the leaders of Libya at the time of Gaddafi's leadership, and therefore he's not considered trustworthy to be a part of the political framework in Libya. And so Saif al-Islam is looking at Russia as an alternative channel to reflect his views, his position, and his plan that he says would help to restabilize Libya again and bring peace to Libya, according to Saif al-Islam. From the Russian point of view, obviously Russia wants to retain its power and presence in Libya. It had strong ties with Gaddafi before he was ousted, and there were a lot of economic cooperation as well. There were contracts that have not been fulfilled, and we're talking like $3.5 billion for construction of a railway line. There was around $3 billion for the energy projects with Libya. There were projects in real estate and also a naval base. At one point, a Russian naval base was being planned to be constructed in Libya. So I think Russia also wants to return to Libya, to have a say in Libya, and to be part of the development or rebuilding of Libya when there is peace there, and therefore it wants to be part of the political process to help Libya become to destabilize again, and the political process there. So it's from both sides, from the Russians and from the Saif al-Islam's point of view.
Well, let's stick with Saif al-Islam. As you say, the West doesn't regard him as the right man, and of course he was instrumental during his father's leadership of the country. Would you say that he is, in fact, instrumental in efforts to stabilize the country?
Well, I think it's a big question, and not too instrumental, but he does have some followers. The Gaddafi and Libya in general is ruled somehow by tribalism, and this feeling of loyalty to the tribes and to the kin is still there. And the Qaddafi tribes were big tribes, and the city of Sabha, where Gaddafi came from, also seeks loyalty to the Gaddafi family and to Saif al-Islam. And all the tribes in the south around Sabha city that had a lot of power during Gaddafi's regime are now longing for the return of his son, and therefore would also support him. There's also a part of the population which sees that Libya during Gaddafi, though he was a dictator, it was more stable and more safe and secure to live in as of now, when they compare between the infighting now, the terrorism, the killings that are happening, the chaos in Libya, and they comparing during the Gaddafi era, though he was a dictator, but it was a stable and safe country for most. Now they say, why not we see him back again, or his son would take over, and we want to see those safe the times back again. So it's not a majority of the population, but there is a segment of the population that is still feeling loyalty to Gaddafi and his family, and therefore he is breathing on this, or he's depending on this kind of tribal loyalty to try to have his own presence in the political scene in Libya and the diplomatic negotiations taking place. And he says that he's supporting the UN resolution and Ghassan Salama, the UN envoy's plans, and therefore he's trying to have some foothold in the political process coming up using his presence and support.
And finally, Yasser, what about the other players in the Libyan conflict? Italy has been involved in trying to find a solution to the crisis, as have France and the US.
Yes, Italy, France, in particular, the European Union have long been in the process, UK to an extent, and the US. But obviously the political process is not going any better. There's not much improvement or a quick improvement as hoped for. You remember there were plans to have a new election, a presidential election, and a new constitution by the end of 2018. Now we're in December 2018, nothing has happened because of the problems of the factions and the different political powers in Libya, and the foreign intervention. And all this has prevented reaching a peaceful solution or some kind of framework between all these militias and political powers in Libya. And the negotiations are still going, and each political power is supported by a superpower or foreign power like France, Italy, UK, and the US, and the neighbors of Libya. So it's still a confusing situation, still not easy to reach a solution, and the negotiations are ongoing and nothing new happening on that side.
Okay, thank you for that update. That was Yasser Hakim in Cairo, following efforts to resolve the crisis in Libya. Well, in the meantime, Libya's Electoral Commission says the country will hold a referendum on a new constitution next year. The announcement by the chairperson, Imed El-Sayyi, signals Libya's first concrete step toward restoring unity and political stability. It followed last month's adoption by Parliament in eastern Libya of an election law that would govern the referendum and future votes. A 60-member panel drafted the constitution and submitted it to Parliament in August. Al-Say warned that the referendum could be delayed if the Election Commission did not receive security guarantees and funds.
Our executive strategy regarding this process is divided into two sections. The first section concerns preparations, while the second involves implementation. We expect to begin this process during the first half of January, running until the end of February. The referendum is thus expected to take place at the end of February. We ask all the parties, all the political groups, all the individuals, all the government officials and all the members of civil society to fulfill their responsibilities regarding this process.
Still in Libya, and a new refugee facility has been opened in Tripoli. The initiative is spearheaded by the UN Refugee Agency in coordination with the Libyan government. It seeks to provide a safe alternative to unsafe immigration detention in the country. CGTN's Tuli Shabalala has more.
This gathering and departure facility is the first center of its kind in Libya. It is intended to bring vulnerable refugees to a safe environment. It has a capacity to shelter up to 1,000 people.
Refugees were brought from different detention centers to spend the last days at this facility, where UNHCR is providing child-friendly spaces, 24/7 medical attention, proper accommodation, and a place of safety and an alternative to detention.
The center is managed by the Libyan Interior Ministry, UNHCR, and the EU and other aid partners. Libya is a transit point for thousands of migrants trying to reach Europe via the Mediterranean.
We are very happy today that alternatives to detention are in place in Libya, and we hope to be able to continue many more evacuations from this facility that just opened.
There is an estimated 5,200 refugees and migrants held in detention centers across Libya. Many are in need of international protection. In efforts to help ease the overcrowded detention centers, the UNHCR has also evacuated thousands of refugees and asylum seekers. Many have found safe refuge in Niger, Italy, and Romania. Tuli Shabalala, CGTN.
The United Nations General Assembly has rejected a United States-sponsored resolution seeking to condemn Hamas. The resolution, which was backed strongly by Israel, needed a two-thirds majority to pass on Thursday, following an earlier vote in the Assembly. The proposal failed to cross the threshold, with 87 nations voting in favour, 57 voting against, and 33 countries abstained. Although a majority of UN member states voted in favour of a General Assembly resolution put forward by the US condemning the activities of Hamas and other militant groups in Gaza, it failed to be adopted at the UN headquarters. During the same meeting, the UN Special Coordinator for the Middle East peace process called for support in efforts to de-escalate the situation in Gaza.
In favor, 87. Against, 57. Abstentions, 33. Resolution A/73/L42 has failed to obtain two-thirds majority.
The United Nations has never once passed a resolution condemning Hamas. Never. Over 700 resolutions condemning Israel, and not one single resolution condemning Hamas.
Today, we achieved a plurality. That plurality would have been a majority if the vote had not been hijacked by a political move of procedure. But in one strong, courageous voice, we have brought Hamas to justice. For those member states that rejected this resolution, you should be ashamed of yourselves. Wait when you will have to deal with terrorism in your own countries. Your silence in the face of evil reveals your true colors.
There is absolutely no balance, no symmetry in this conflict. There is an occupier and an occupied people. And the rules of international law, including humanitarian and human rights law, are patently clear in this regard. So, we reject the premise of the need to bring balance to UN resolutions as a pretext to undertake what is clearly an anti-Palestinian action.
After years of dispute over the Western Sahara region, Morocco and the Polisario Front have met for talks. The talks were the first in over 6 years. The Polisario Front is the main opposition group. Morocco's foreign minister also took part in the talks. Groups like the Polisario Front have been pushing for an independence referendum. Morocco, though, opposes the measure, offering to create an autonomous region. The conflict driven around 100,000 refugees to camps in western Algeria. The UN envoy to the Western Sahara expressed his optimism at finding a peaceful solution in the region.
I'm therefore very pleased to announce that the delegations have committed to engaging further. My hope is that this process will be guided first and foremost by a concern for the men and women, the children and youth of the people of Western Sahara.
The meeting today was a good progress. It's not yet a breakthrough, but it's a good progress.
Moving on to Rwanda, where government critic Diane Rwigara has reacted to her release after more than a year in jail. Rwigara said that she was pleased with the verdict. On Thursday, the High Court in Kigali acquitted Diane and her mother on charges of inciting insurrection and forgery. The 37-year-old businesswoman was arrested in September 2017. She was the only female who showed interest in the presidential elections held in August 2017. US senators urged the Rwandan government to drop the charges against her. In response, Rwanda's justice minister told reporters that courts should not be pressured by third parties.
I do not know what pushed the government to release us. All I know is that we are innocent. We were innocent, and we're happy with the verdict.
I am very pleased with the verdict and thank God, because you can see the entire world was working to support us and God let this happen. We don't know who put the pressure to get us released from within the country and also from outside. I say to them, thank you for everything.
We're going to a short break now. Don't go away, lots more to come, including the WHO report highlights a rise in road traffic deaths, and Egypt turns to solar-powered irrigation to combat climate change.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
A new report by the World Health Organization indicates road traffic deaths continue to rise, with an annual 1.35 million fatalities. The Global Status Report on Road Safety 2018 highlights road traffic injuries as the leading killer of children and young people aged 5 to 29 years. It documents that despite an increase in the overall number of deaths, the rates of death relative to the size of the world population have stabilized in recent years, suggesting that existing road safety efforts in some middle and high-income countries like Sweden and the Netherlands have mitigated the situation. These countries adopted targeted legislation around key risks such as speeding, drinking and driving, and failing to use seat belts. The report is published every 2 to 3 years.
The number should be going down because governments have committed to a 50% reduction over 5 years of road traffic deaths. And instead, we're seeing a slight increase still because we're not taking the necessary measures. We already knew it was the leading cause of death for the 15 to 29-year-olds. Now it's also the leading cause of death for the 5 to 14-year-old. These are young children going to school, going out to play and getting killed because there's no sidewalk, because there's no safe playground, because basically governments haven't put in place the infrastructure to allow them to do so safely. Appropriate infrastructure. So many new roads are still being built without sidewalks for kids to walk, or bicycle lanes, or even safe lanes for motorcyclists. And then making sure vehicles are safe. Airbags, seat belts, electronic stability control, these are all relatively cheap features that make vehicles much safer.
As the United Nations unveils its spending requirements for 2019, it says conflict and climate change are fueling humanitarian crises in sub-Saharan Africa. CGTN's Terry Wangari now reports.
The United Nations says it needs more than $9 billion to fund its humanitarian work in sub-Saharan Africa next year, as the twin challenges of conflict and climate change continue to wreak havoc with people's lives. It's an increase on 2018, as the UN says humanitarian crises are lasting longer and affecting more people than before.
Something like 1 person in 70 around the world is caught up in crisis and urgently needs humanitarian help or protection.
The UN has humanitarian response plans in place for 11 sub-Saharan countries ranging in size from $106 million to $1.6 billion. And it said humanitarian needs will likely remain exceptionally high in 4 of them: the Democratic Republic of Congo, Nigeria, South Sudan, and Ethiopia. In the DRC, the UN said persistent conflicts had caused a decline in agricultural activity, leaving a predicted 12.8 million people facing food insecurity. That situation worsened by the persistence of cholera and the Ebola outbreak. Despite being by many measures the richest country on the continent, many Nigerians have suffered due to the conflict with Boko Haram and other insurgent groups in the northeast. The UN said 7.1 million will need assistance in the country's 3 northeastern states, and added that general elections in February increased the risk of violence. A revitalized peace process offers hope for a greater future in South Sudan. But 5 years of conflict have taken their toll. Nearly half the population is expected to be severely food insecure at the start of next year. Millions also require food assistance in Ethiopia following 2 consecutive years of drought. An expected El Nino weather phenomenon at the end of this year could make the situation worse, something the UN warned could cause droughts, tropical cyclones, and floods across the world. Globally, the UN says it needs $21.9 billion for 2019 to help 93.6 million people in need. Terry Wangari, CGTN.
Meanwhile, in Egypt, climate change is starting to affect the country's agricultural sector. The government, with the help of the UN, is looking towards green energy for a lasting solution.
As the Nile shrinks due to climate change, these lush green fields are under threat. Farmers have had to resort to tapping groundwater to irrigate their fields.
We used to use gas-powered engines to irrigate the land ourselves, and we had to maintain the machines as well, which was a hassle.
The government has partnered with the United Nations to set up solar-powered watering systems.
We need to shift modern irrigation with solar power. All of this benefits the farmers in terms of environment, quality of life, and productivity. Operation and maintenance costs increase because of the new development system. This directly affects productivity, which in return results into a higher income for the farmers.
It's estimated Egypt could lose 15% of its agricultural land by 2050. Programs such as these look to adapt and prevent lasting damage from climate change. Asatal, CGTN.
The 7th meeting of ministers concerned with women's affairs have called on IGAD member states to adopt Africa Plan 2063. This is to promote gender equality and the empowerment of African women. The meeting was also attended by IGAD member governments, donors, development partners and intergovernmental organisations. Sudan says that it is fully committed to the decisions, policies and strategies of IGAD.
Despite the gains that African women have received from one another, our ambitions are looking forward to more under the shadow of what has been agreed upon by the countries of the world, the objectives of sustainable development and Africa Plan 2063 to promote gender equality and the empowerment of African women.
We are convinced that in the implementation of resolutions of this meeting, IGAD Secretariat will strengthen the regional framework, framework for advancing gender equality and women's empowerment by deepening attention to the emerging and critically important challenges of drought resilience, migration management, and peace support operations.
On to Kenya now, and as the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime Workshop for Youth draws to a close, CGTN's Robert Nagila held a discussion on various issues on corruption in Kenya with a group of young people at the UNEP headquarters in Nairobi.
First of all, thank you so much for taking part in this panel discussion. I want to start with you, Leanne. Why is this workshop so important as far as youth participation is concerned?
It draws youth from all over the country, from different counties. Therefore, we get to get a different perspective and experiences from individuals, not just what the media presents or what, just the cherry-picking news. The interaction and the platform to engage and to know that there's a wider network of similar-minded youth.
Austin, let me throw this out to you. Do you feel when it comes to the fight against corruption, the youth are completely left out, and why?
The government top officials are engaging themselves. They are engaging among themselves, leaving the youths outside. So as a change maker and a voice of the youth, I want to see a society whereby they are creating awareness, especially for me. I want to create awareness, tell the youth the effects and what causes corruption.
How do we change that? Are you saying that perhaps we need to see more youth running for elective office? Are you saying that we need to see more youth take part in affirmative action?
I think it's time for the youth to actually realize that we are being given a platform to step up, and we are being given a platform to speak what we want, because as entrepreneurs, as employees, we want to be making a sustainable economy for our generations to come.
When it comes to corruption, where do you think the problem is as far as Kenya is concerned?
I think the problem is on the judiciary, because the judiciary keeps on, the cases take too long to proceed. Then you find that holders of public offices, whenever they are implicated on matters of corruption, they are released on bail or bond, then they go back to their offices, instead stepping aside until you are cleared of all the allegations.
Corruption is a subject. We just use it as a blanket term, but no one goes into details as to what does corruption constitute, why is the corruption there, and who are the key players that we need to be engaging, aside from the youth, because we are the leaders of today, not tomorrow. Tomorrow is already here.
What is it that you're fighting for, you're aiming to fight for as far as corruption is concerned?
I want to see a generation whereby everyone will be culpable, will be taking responsibility of what they are, of who they are and what they have.
If we get to a point where we actually respect someone else's opinion, we respect property, we respect the laws, the policy. When we get there, I think that will be the greatest joy.
We also need the officials that we've elected. We need people in the industry movers and shakers to create that platform, to take on mentorship programs, internships, apprenticeships, and create that opportunity.
So in essence, what I'm getting from this discussion, you would like to be heard more, you would like to be more involved in matters of national importance, but more importantly, the media has a role to play when it comes to civic education. I'm afraid that's all we have time for. Thank you very much for your input and for your time as well. Robert Nagela, CGTN, Nairobi.
A recap of your top stories now. Saif al-Islam, the son of late leader Muammar Gaddafi, has called on Russia to support a plan to resolve the Libyan crisis. Al Arabiya TV channel is reporting that Saif al-Islam envoy visited Moscow earlier in the week as part of a Libyan delegation. The group held meetings with Russian officials, including Deputy Foreign Minister Mikhail Bogdanov. Libya is looking for ways to have a national reconciliation dialogue that will involve all warring parties. This in efforts to restore and secure a roadmap for Libya's peace process. The United Nations General Assembly has rejected a United States-sponsored resolution seeking to condemn Hamas. The resolution, which was backed strongly by Israel, needed a two-thirds majority to pass on Thursday, following an earlier vote in the Assembly. The proposal failed to cross the threshold, with 87 nations voting in favour, 57 voting against, and 33 countries abstained. After years of dispute over the Western Sahara region, Morocco and the Polisario Front met for talks. The talks were the first in over 6 years. The Polisario Front is the main opposition group, and they were present. Morocco's foreign minister also took part in the talks. Groups like the Polisario Front have been pushing for an independence referendum. Morocco, though, opposes the measure, offering to create an autonomous region. A new report by the World Health Organization indicates road traffic deaths continue to rise, with an annual 1.35 million fatalities. The Global Status Report on Road Safety 2018 highlights road traffic injuries as the leading killer of children and young people aged 5 to 29. It documents that despite an increase in the overall number of deaths, the rates of death relative to the size of the world population have stabilized in recent years, suggesting that existing road safety efforts in some middle and high-income countries like Sweden and the Netherlands have mitigated the situation. And those are the top stories that we're covering for you. Well, we are going to a short break now. We've got all the business news coming up, including crude prices fall after OPEC members failed to agree on production cuts. And Uganda's parliament vetoes government plans to roll out a new e-passport.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Oil prices fell on Friday after the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries delayed a final decision on output cuts. International Brent crude oil fell below $60 per barrel, trading at $59.50 per barrel. The decline comes after crude oil slumped by almost 3%, with OPEC ending a meeting at its headquarters in Vienna in Austria. Oil output from the world's biggest producers, OPEC, Russia and the United States, has increased by 3.3 million barrels a day. OPEC tentatively agreed an oil output cut, but was waiting for a commitment from Russia before deciding the exact volumes for a production reduction.
There is a good agreement within OPEC, but there's still a need to continue to negotiate with other partners outside OPEC. Personally, I'm optimistic we will reach an agreement.
Egypt is one of the most affected nations by the wave of rising oil prices. CGTN's Yasser Hakim takes a look at how the country's economy and government is dealing with the shift.
Egypt produces only 660 barrels of oil per day, but consumes 800,000. The difference is imported at international prices. The government subsidies energy, and the bill for oil subsidies alone is about $7 billion a year, which is why any fluctuations in international oil prices affect the budget.
Every time there's a $1 increase in oil prices, it raises the subsidy bill by $200 million. So imagine the impact it had when the oil price jumped from $67 to $80 a barrel. The only way to cover the difference was to cut subsidies, and that's what the government did.
Reducing energy subsidies increases the price of electricity and fuel. It has a knock-on effect, hiking the cost of basic items and adding to the financial budget and burden of low-income earners. But the latest drop in international oil prices does not mean the government grants will be reinstated, as many Egyptians had hoped.
The subsidy cuts are part of an economic reform plan approved by the IMF, so the government will continue with them. But if oil prices stay low, then the money the state has saved will be spent on other services such as healthcare, education, and importing basic necessities.
Recently, Egypt's economy has received a major boost with the discovery of huge reserves of natural gas. The country is now self-sufficient in natural gas and is aiming to become a major exporter.
Being self-sufficient means you're no longer importing, so there's less expenditure in the budget. And with the liquefaction plants in Edfu and Damietta, Egypt is becoming a regional hub, which will provide a source of hard currency to balance out the import and subsidy bills.
The government is closely monitoring international oil prices, hoping it will remain below the $60 mark as it's forecast in the latest 2018-2019 budget. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
A bail hearing is expected later today for a Huawei Technologies executive arrested in Vancouver in Canada. The hearing comes amidst calls from the Chinese Foreign Ministry for the immediate release of Huawei CFO Meng Wanzhou, who has been in custody since Saturday. CGTN's Jim Spellman has the details.
Meng Wanzhou, CFO of Chinese tech giant Huawei, has been detained in Canada as the United States hopes to extradite her on unspecified charges.
China has made clear its solemn position separately to Canada and the United States, requesting them to immediately clarify the reasons for detention, immediately release the detainee, and guarantee the legitimate rights and interests of the person concerned.
Meng was detained Saturday in Vancouver while changing planes. The American side has not released information on the case, but a U.S. senator says Meng allegedly violated U.S. sanctions against Iran. In a statement, China's embassy in Canada says, at the request of the U.S. side, the Canadian side arrested a Chinese citizen not violating any American or Canadian law. The Chinese side firmly opposes and strongly protests such kind of actions, which seriously harmed the human rights of the victim. And in a statement posted to Twitter, Huawei writes, the company has been provided very little information regarding the charges and is not aware of any wrongdoing by Ms. Meng. Huawei complies with all applicable laws and regulations where it operates, including applicable export control and sanction laws and regulations of the UN, US, and EU. Huawei is one of the world's largest mobile phone manufacturers and is pioneering 5G mobile products, including a phone capable of piloting a car. But the US and other countries have blocked the use of Huawei products, citing security concerns. In China, some see the push against Huawei as a way to limit competition.
China's economy is becoming stronger, and I think the US may be unhappy, so they did something to harm China's interest, which I guess may be related to Meng's arrest.
Meng will appear in a Canadian court Friday for a bail hearing. She requested and the court granted a publication ban, so it's not clear how much information we'll get out of that hearing. According to the extradition treaty between the two countries, the United States will have to present Canada with evidence that Meng committed a crime for extradition to move forward. Jim Spellman, CGTN, Washington.
The Ugandan Parliament has rejected a government proposal to issue the new East African e-passport and phase out the existing travel documents. MPs blocked the move over its legality and cost to its users. CGTN's Michael Beleke has this report.
The first batch of newly introduced East African e-passports arrived in Uganda this week. They are due to be distributed this month. But the planned rollout has hit a snag as legislators raise concerns over the legitimacy of the process.
There is no way how a government can come up with an arrangement without involving all stakeholders, because it means a lot. There are those with passports which are still running up to 2030. There are those with passports that are remaining with 5 years to expire.
It is a global trend. It is a regional demand, like in East Africa. I think we committed to change over. But I think what the institution of immigration has not done properly is the timing. And two, well knowing that it has a cost implication.
According to government, the new East African e-passports will have chips containing electronically processed biometric information about the holder. The current machine-readable passports only hold traditional text information, a photo and ghost image. The 6-member East African community has set January 2021 as the deadline for phasing out the traditional passports. But legislators here say the process in Uganda has been rushed. Parliament has ruled that the whole process be reviewed.
Have you signed a protocol with other East African community countries? Are you having the same commencement date? Why are you putting Ugandans and holding them at ransom?
The new e-passports are expected to cost between $70 and $130 more than the old documents. The government has asked for time to look into the MP's concerns. Michael Beleke, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
We're going to a short break. Don't go away. Coming up, world's largest museum dedicated to black civilizations opens in Senegal.
Join us in Global Business and see Africa through our eyes. The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Kanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Senegal has just inaugurated its monumental Museum of Black Civilizations. With the support of China, this 50-year project was realized.
50 years after its completion, the Museum of Black Civilizations stands tall in Dakar. It is the biggest museum of its kind. With the support of China, the Pan-African project is now a reality.
The Museum of Black Civilizations boasts modern facilities and equipment, advanced exhibition techniques and new design ideas. The rich collections drawn from all over the world reveal to visitors the process of development of black civilizations and its influence on the world.
The museum's opening comes after France announced its intent on returning African artworks taken during colonial times.
I hope that the action by President Emmanuel Macron will open the door to a serene and peaceful dialogue on African heritage. His predecessor, President Francois Hollande, handed the provision of El Hajj Omar Iyal's sword, who was a fierce religious guide who fought against colonial powers.
The museum has a capacity to display up to 18,000 pieces, providing a veritable landmark to travel to and learn about Black civilizations. Asatal, CGTN.
Let's now cross over to the DRC, where a Chinese woman living in the country has shot to fame by singing popular Congolese songs in the local language. Zhang Weishuang came to the DRC 10 years ago on
Amringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
We have all the sport coming up after the break, including South Africa's Blitzboks out for a strong rugby sevens showing on home soil.
Africa, where champions are made, records are broken, legends are born. We're there for every goal, for every knockout, for every step of the way.
Match Point, only on CGTN.
South Africa will host the next leg of the World Sevens Series in Cape Town this weekend. The home side will wear Madiba-style jerseys that pay tribute to the late former President Nelson Mandela, who would have turned 100 this year. The pressure will be on the reigning World Series champions to improve on a tepid performance in Dubai last weekend. CGTN CS Duplessis has more.
4 seconds. The tournament hosts are licking their wounds after the disappointment of finishing 6th in Dubai. Numerous mistakes and a poor defensive effort cost Neil Powell's men, and now they will need to lift themselves in order to bounce back and end their wait for their first title on home. Soil since the inaugural tournament in the mother city in 2015.
We haven't been able to lift the cup in front of our home supporters, so that's definitely something that we want to do. We know the crowd will back us, we know you'll get that extra little bit of energy from the crowd, so yeah, everything is in our favour there. We just need to make it happen and we need to be ready once we hit that pitch in Cape Town.
For Siviwe Soizvapi, it will be his Cape Town tournament debut. And to be playing at a sold-out Cape Town stadium is an opportunity the speedy winger relishes, especially with Samoa, Zimbabwe and New Zealand in their group.
Yeah, I think personally this will be my first time playing in the Cape Town Sevens. I've come in as 13th man a couple of times, but it would be a huge honor. It would be very special. I mean, for me, it's one of the tournaments I'm looking forward to playing. So to win it then in that jersey, extra special.
It will be the last tournament for the dynamic Roscoe Speckman, who will join up with the Bulls Super Rugby team after the weekend. And the 27 tournament veteran feels the men in green and gold will need to not get distracted by the pressure if they're to end the year off in style.
I think the Cape Town title is one of the titles we just want to get back. The last 3 seasons we've been the semi-finals, then we come short, and I can't say it's pressure from the fans and stuff like that, because at the end of the day you on that field.
South Africa has not been a happy hunting ground for the Blitzboks, winning just 4 tournaments staged on home soil. While the other team in their group, New Zealand, love playing in the Republic, having won 10 of the 19 tournaments since 1999. The home side will need to be at their best to end their wait. I hope they can draw on a bit of Madiba magic to help them secure the cup. CS du Plessis, CGTN, Johannesburg.
Work has got underway on many of the 2022 FIFA World Cup projects, including the Al Rayyan Stadium, which is due to be completed in 2019. The stadium is connected with the popular football team Al Rayyan Sports Club, that's predominantly known for its history and local culture. The new arena is set to host up to 40,000 fans at World Cup matches through to the quarter-final stage. Qatar 2022 Assistant Secretary-General Nasser Al-Khater, meanwhile, addressed doubts over the country's ability to host the tournament in the wake of Cameroon's loss of hosting rights at the 2019 Africa Cup of Nations.
We've always been confident about our capabilities and abilities to host an amazing World Cup. However, over the past 8 years since Qatar won the right to host the World Cup, there have been a lot of campaigns against our World Cup, against Qatar. They started off by questioning the rights of Qatar based on a lot of false allegations that have been peddled around in the international media. Subsequent to that, there was a underlying theme is attacking Qatar for hosting this World Cup.
In Spain, Real Madrid eased into the last 16 of the Copa del Rey after a 6-1 win at home to third-tier Melilla. The 4-0 victory in the first leg meant it finished 10-1 on aggregate, as Los Blancos took to win the trophy for a 20th time. Marco Asensio was the star of the first half, netting twice in the 33rd and the 35th minutes, while also setting up Javi Sanchez in the 39th to put Real 3-0 up at the interval. The onslaught continued after the break, with Isco scoring a stunning fourth from a long-range curler outside the box. 12 minutes into the second half, Vinicius Jr. got on the score sheet for the first time for the club. 10 minutes later, the visitors did pull one back through Yassine Kasmi's penalty with 20 minutes left, but Isco added his second to the scoreline soon after, as Madrid cruised into the round of 16. River Plate held their first training session in Madrid as they started their preparations ahead of the rearranged Copa Libertadores second leg final against fierce Argentine rivals Boca Juniors. The Argentine club faced their rivals on Sunday at Real Madrid's Bernabeu Stadium. The team went through a relaxed training session that lasted an hour and will again train behind closed doors on Friday and Saturday. The second leg was originally due to be played on Saturday, the 24th of November at El Monumental, but was suspended due to attacks against the Boca team bus by River Plate fans.
We would have liked to play this match as the home team at the River pitch with our fans who deserve this, but the decision is made, so we'll just offer them the best. We'll offer them this title that we deserve, that the fans deserve, and that everyone who supports us deserves.
Home favourite Louis Oosthuizen surged into the first round lead in the South African Open in Johannesburg on Thursday after shooting a brilliant 9 under par 62. The former Open champion fired 9 birdies and 9 pars in his flawless round and leads by 1 shot from Zambia's Madalitso Mutia and American Kurt Kitayama, winner of last week's Mauritius Open. Another South African, Xander Lombard, shot a 64 to lie 2 shots back, one ahead of a group that includes England's Matt Wallace, a 3-time winner on the European Tour in 2018. South Africa's former Masters, US Open and British Open champion Ernie Els will also be pleased with his start of 5 under par 66. Derek Favors had 24 points and 10 rebounds off the bench to help the Utah Jazz overcome Rudy Gobert's quick ejection and coast to a 118-91 victory over the Houston Rockets on Thursday night. Joe Ingles added 18 points and 6 rebounds for the Jazz on their way to victory for the 4th time in 5 games. James Harden scored 15 points, while Chris Paul and Clint Capella added 12 apiece for the Rockets. The Jazz were forced to play the bulk of the game without Gobert, who was ejected less than 3 minutes into the first half. Favours stepped up to bookend Jazz baskets over 3 straight possessions with a dunk and a hook shot to give Utah its largest lead at 91-54. They maintained that momentum to ease to a 118-91 win.
But listen, Utah began this game with the foul. Those 3 players, they were not the headliners like those 2 guys were for Mike D'Antoni.
Well, that's it for this edition of Africa Live. Remember, you can send your feedback to the contacts on the screen and follow us on digital media platforms. Thank you for watching and see you again soon. Bye for now.